but you know, let's take the label piece out of it, right? And let's just look at it like this. When you say narcissism, it's really just a catch-all word, right? That encompasses a whole lot of things. And just to kind of put that in perspective, and I talk about my fibromyalgia story, because like, it's, first of all, to me, it's symbolic of how this narcissism, how it kind of works, you know, on your body, how it kind of works on the body of Christ, you know. And so when I say I feel led, it's because I see how my physical illness was an exact representation of the illness that was going on in my own church, right? And if any, you know, if you guys have seen any of my posts or anything, I have a YouTube page where I've started to try to talk about you know, my father being a spiritual narcissist, right? And I know it's bad, and you know, I know I'm probably going to get a little bit of flack from church people, you know, for that, right? But I feel really, really strongly about this, and I feel really passionate about this. And the reason is because when I first was diagnosed with fibromyalgia, I had probably dealt with the symptoms for a year, right, before that happened. So I was having stomach problems, headaches, body aches, fatigue. So I would like maybe have a headache, and then, you know, maybe the lower back half of my body would hurt or something, right? It would just be random stuff that really didn't seem like it had anything to do with anything. It didn't really seem like the symptoms, you know, like they matched each other, you know. So like if you have a bunch of stomach problems and you say, okay, I got a stomach problem, right? But if you have like a head problem and then your legs are hurting too, it's like, okay, what's going on with my body, right? And so that's what I noticed was happening in our own church. Is like we were having all these symptoms, and all these symptoms, all it did for me when I was diagnosed with fibromyalgia is like, okay, there is a name for what this is, right? There's just a one, you know, good little package to put it in, you know, to call, you know, all these symptoms that I was having, we're going to call it all fibromyalgia. And so all these symptoms that I'm seeing experienced in the church, we're going to call it spiritual narcissism. We're just going to put it in that box, and we're going to call it that. Just call it thing a thing, you know, and just, it is what it is, right? And so now that we've done that, let's just get to the actual meat of it, you know, and what this thing is really doing to our bodies. And so that's where, you know, I feel like God has led me into this. It's like, now it's like, what is this doing to my body as it relates to fibromyalgia? What is narcissism doing to the body of Christ? You know, what is it doing to our physical bodies? You know, what is it doing to our mental health? What is it doing to our families? And it's really just ripping us apart. So. Okay,
so, yeah. Go ahead, Tommy.
No, I was just saying that's a great analogy. I really like that. That was good.
Thank you.
So it's very, very profound. So because you know, you added that to the point when you talked about spiritual narcissism, and that's the first time I've heard that term point,
right?
Spiritual narcissism. And so, to simplify for a 9 or 10-year-old may be listening, I doubt it, but
okay.
A spiritual narcissist would simply be someone who's all about themselves, maybe.
Yeah, you can say that. Okay, so like if I was putting it in terms of you know, where a child would understand. So like my kids, for example, right? They at one point they actually left the church before my husband and I did. My husband and I we left in August of 2019, and my kids left my parents' church before I did. And their complaint was, Grandpa always talks about himself, you know, and he's always like talking about people. And so they were noticing that his sermons were like less and less about God, and it was mostly about trying to convict people or like passively aggressively, you know, talking about people or trying to get people back in line with, you know, whatever his agenda was. You know, that's what he was doing. So a kid may notice like, man, he's really talking about himself a lot, you know, really building himself up, and just, you know, it's all about himself, you know. But it's much deeper than that, much deeper.
It's much deeper than that.
Yeah.
But on the base level, that's what you kind of understand about the fears of narcissism. Wow. So we talked about the definition. I want to talk about some of the causes, I guess you could say, or some of the examples of when you talk about church hurt. One of the few things that a lot of people can say, okay, that's what they mean. And the first thing I want to address real quick, I guess, is hypocrisy. Now, I know that word is thrown around a lot, but when you talk about the original Greek definition of hypocrisy and what a hypocrite was, that was simply a person that, as a matter of fact, today, when we were in church, the associate minister broke down about hypocrisy and how that was a Greek actor who played two different roles in the same play. So they played this role, and then he was to come out as another. So they're acting two different ways. When you talk about a hypocrite is someone who they may say one thing or may act one way in front of one group of people, but then turn around and do something different. And so when you talk about hypocrisy being church hurt, what are your thoughts about that?
The hypocrisy is, like you said, Jonathan. It's a word that's used a lot, and I don't think people have a misconception of the word or the term. I think they do have a basic understanding of what a hypocrite is, and just putting it in layman terms, you're saying one thing and doing something else. So it's coming again. So you're speaking on something that your brother is doing, but you got going on yourself, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So when it comes to hypocrisy and what is the link between hypocrisy and church hurt, I think there's a big connection between the two. Because like Dolores was saying, when you hear a message coming from the pulpit that you feel like it's manipulative, but you talk about how you can't be manipulative because it's not churchy, it's not godlike to do that. But you know that the sermon that's coming at you is loaded and it's double-sided. So even the fact that the children realize that, hey, this is a preacher that this shouldn't be happening, but even a child can understand and realize when those things are happening. So what that does, again, it brings me back to, and I will always come back to this point, it hurts people's relationship with God because it weakens as my boy Greg said, it hurts their message. It weakens the relationship from the people who are supposed to be representatives of God. And that hurts people because now it's like, I got this out in the world. I get this at work. Why am I getting this on Sunday morning? Yes.
Right.
And even the hypocrisy that comes with other believers. And I'm glad that Dolores is taking a stance from leadership because I want to take a different stance because, you're looking from the bottom up at the pulpit, but let's look from left to right and what happens with hypocrisy with the people who are sitting next to you. If we're all supposed to be, again, and I say we are because I know that we're believers, when we look left and right and we see people who are supposed to maybe keep our most guarded secrets or give us these words of encouragement, and then we find out that you basically tripping on the same things that I'm tripping on, then again, it hurts your message and it hurts your witness and your testimony, saying that, hey, God can do this for me, but if he can do this for you, why are you still doing this? So it's definitely one of those things we need to look at from a closer angle because hypocrisy hurts a lot of people simply because of the nature of what it is. Right. I say one thing and I do another.
Right.
Yes.
Right.
Doris, did you want to say anything? I was going to read
I was just, piggybacking. I would say the same thing. And even more so on top of the... he always talks about himself. It's like, well, he never really listens, maybe there are people in the church giving ideas and, he doesn't have, the leader may not have an open ear to that. Or, let me see, like it's probably better to show it than it is to tell it. And I think that that's probably the biggest problem that people are having in the church is because, like, okay, like I can tell you all day long, these are the types of things that will happen. But what's missing in a lot of these scenarios is actual like evidence. This is actual evidence, and that was something that I've been able to gather. Being in the role that I was in the church. Now I was the praise team leader. Pretty much my whole life. And I was over the youth. So I was in leadership as well. And so, I was privy to the backdoor meetings, so I knew a lot of the, the ins and outs of that was going on with the members of the church, and so, when we talk about the hypocrisy piece, we talk about the spiritual narcissism piece. Like it just doesn't hit the same unless you can show actual evidence. And I believe that's what God has given me, that actual evidence. Do you want to know what I mean by that?
So and that's great, because like you said, you trying to teach someone the best way to teach is to model.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Let me just throw this curveball out.
Okay.
Hey, Dolores.
We'll see. Like, okay. I think I'm probably talking in a little bit of code here when I just really need to be just blunt with this thing. Okay.
Okay.
This is too serious of a topic for me to even beat around the bush with it. Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
So I'm gonna just tell you what happened. I got really, really sick. Now, you guys know I already told you I have fibromyalgia, right? Well, I ended up getting really sick in my stomach, and it was what it did was it kept me from going to church. It interfered with my ability to go to church. I was throwing up all the time. I lost a ton of weight. It was pretty much from my mouth, down. Everything was damaged. And so I ended up having part of my colon removed and part of my intestine removed as a result of that attack. But during that attack, because I could not fulfill my normal obligations to my church, that's when I started to really see the cracks in the leadership. Now, the leadership is my father, right? And my mother was the co-pastor. My mother is not pastoring right now. And, just for the sake of this, I won't go into her story right now, but we'll just focus on my father at this time. But as a result of getting sick and missing church, I started to realize, like, wow, I'm being attacked because I'm not able to fulfill, my normal obligations. And I was starting to see the attacks that was done on other people. And so this was at the time when there was this whole big thing. Everybody started calling Donald Trump a narcissist, right? And so I forgot the black lady's name who recorded him. And then there was some other people who started recording him. And then it was like, oh, well, maybe I should record him. And so that's when the idea came to me to start recording my father. And so from the beginning of 2018, I started recording my father and recording these incidents that I just knew weren't right.
Are you talking about, I'm sorry, when you say record, are you talking about sermons, or are you talking about just personal conversations amongst you?
I'm talking about both.
You're breaking up.
Both. Can you hear me?
Oh, both. Okay.
Yes,
gotcha.
both.
Okay.
Both.
Yes, I can hear you now. Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Both. And so that's when I was able to really uncover this spiritual narcissism, and so I started just writing about my experience, and God was revealing to me all the things that was happening. And he was revealing that through the recordings, because I can say all day long, like I said, this is what he said, this is what happened, this is what was done. But unless you're there, you really just look crazy. Unless you can hear it, you really, people who are victims of spiritual abuse, of regular abuse, sexual abuse, any type of abuse like that, it's hard to prove it, right? And so and then when you talk about someone who is highly manipulative, someone who is highly controlling, someone who is entitled, someone who is prone to rage, and all of this is done with a spiritual spin on it behind the pulpit, that's where, it started happening for me. And so, like, that's where I am now.
Wow.
Yeah, that's deep, right?
That is very deep.
And you mentioned about abuse, and that's a perfect segue because you have multiple abuses that have occurred in the church.
Yeah.
Whether you talk about sexual abuse, mental, spiritual, emotional, you have a lot of abuse that has occurred. And when you talk about church hurt, some of these things, it's a difference between someone talking about what you have on and someone physically or spiritually hurting you.
Right.
You can look at the Catholic Church and scandals, they're still trying to pay off. You don't even have to go to the Catholic Church. You can just go to any church.
Sure.
And you can hear stories of different types of abuses. Don said, for me, the hypocrisy is not church leadership standing the same as me. I expect it because they're not Jesus. What does it for me is leadership not acknowledging repentance, asking fellow believers for forgiveness when they get it wrong and not doing it again. Simple stuff isn't rectified. I can't trust you with heavy stuff. Okay, that's what, yeah. So acknowledging and repentance. So what you're saying is hypocrisy is not when they do wrong, because everyone is human. Hypocrisy comes when you don't acknowledge. Leadership does not acknowledge the wrong that has been done, nor repent from it.
It's a pattern.
Okay.
It's a pattern.
Yeah.
It's a pattern.
You know, and the thing that I kind of wanted to come back around to, guys, is that we oftentimes we can put a name to a problem when we finally do put a name to the problem. But the thing about it is we're in the, and I don't want to say this and to be misconstrued, the business of people, but this is what we're doing, and we have to start asking tough questions. What happens and what is the effect of church hurt on the people who are supposed to be coming into this place of refuge? Because in leadership, we see and deal with a lot, and we keep a lot of secrets, okay?
Yeah.
And I as well have been in positions of leadership in church as well, and I've been privy to certain conversations and seeing certain things that, again, I would never speak on, just simply because it's not necessary, and I believe it does hurt even more. But I've also seen smaller cases, I wouldn't say smaller cases, but cases where it's not as traumatic as much as, hey, I want to go talk to the pastor afterwards. And the pastor kind of gives them that brush off like, hey, how you doing? And it's that pat on the back on the way to somebody else who's got a little bit more money.
Mm.
So and again, I'm not going to call names, but I'm telling you that this does more hurt in the heart of a person, because people are not dumb. People know that, these are the people who have X, Y, Z, and they pay a majority or a lump sum of this to the church, so they get special attention from the pastor.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. There's a lot of different aspects that we can come at this, but this is something that I definitely want to take a look at, is how we're affecting the people that we're supposed to be affecting when we deal with these things, or we allow these things to happen. So this conversation is not just needed because it needs to be exposed. There's some things that we need to come up as far as answers or steps to take, that we need to move past this. And one thing, I was looking at the comments here, and Mrs. Sophia said, you couldn't have been a teenage mother back in the day, but when a teenage girl comes up pregnant, you can't wait to get home from church and call your gossip buddies and talk about it.
Yeah.
And this is one of those things too, again. Instead of somebody coming to this young lady, whoever she may be, throwing their arms around her, giving her the love and support, because again, I'm quite sure that, in the day and age we live in, even if they made it to the altar and said, I do, I'm sure, a lot of us weren't virgins when we did. It just so happens in this case, there's a child that's going to be involved out of that situation. See, the condemnation should not come because of the act that was done. It shouldn't be condemnation anyway. Mm-hmm. But what happens is, you just affected a child that hadn't even been born because of the hurt that you inflicted upon the mom. So you have a whole other generation that's been touched because of the irresponsibility or the lack of compassion from leadership, not just leadership, but she said this, the gossiping buddies. That means not the people in the pulpit, but the people on the left and the people on the right.
Right. You got it from the top to bottom, or bottom to top, and then from left to right.
Correct.
Mm-hmm.
Listen,
Yeah.
I'm about to go here. Okay? I'm about to go here, and I want to put a disclaimer out there. I'm not. I'm just going to say what I have to say because we've had this conversation a few times.
Sure.
Lord, you can just chime on in.
Okay.
Talk about church hurt. You brought up a teenage mother who's pregnant and we talked about.
Mm-hmm.
And what I've always said is the church is focused more on attacking sin as opposed to attacking sinner.
Sure.
And you think about the church, and I don't want to say the church as in all churches, but when you talk about this in church, what group of people have been attacked the most in the recent past 10, 15, 20 years?
You want me to say it or you going to say it?
Yeah, I can say LGBTQ community.
Okay. All right.
Go ahead and just, when you talk about abuse, when you talk about whether it's sexual abuse or whatever, the LGBT community has been attacked probably more than the LGBT community has taken over the role of the teenage girl who was pregnant back in the 50s and 60s and 70s. Here's the reason why. We talk about in the Bible, homosexuality is wrong. Just like premarital sex is wrong. Just like adultery is wrong. Just like fornication is wrong. All of it is wrong according to the Bible. The thing is this. If I walk in the church, pastor or people in there can't point out, where I bet you he been having sex. I bet he had sex last night, fornicating. They can't point out, but I bet you doing this. Mm-hmm. You're part of the LGBTQ community. It may be a little easier to point out, so it's an easy target.
Easy target.
So, that community is an easy target. And I would never forget where I was in seminary at the Interdenominational Theological Center in Atlanta, Georgia, and I had a professor, and it was the introduction to Old Testament. And for the longest, I could not understand why everyone in the Bible that he talked about was gay. Every character that he talked about, from David and Jonathan, they were gay. And then when he got to the story of Sodom and Gomorrah, he would say, no, they weren't gay. They were just watchers of the city. And I questioned him on it, and everybody just busted out laughing. I said, you didn't tell me everybody in the Bible was gay, except one that the Bible says gay. My point was this: he had a mission to witness and preach to the LGBT community because his brother was homosexual and his brother died of AIDS, and all those people who was his friends left him by. And there's a church now, and this was over 10 plus years ago. You have people from the LGBT community who still want to worship, who still want to serve, who still want to be in the church. The church has turned their back on them. You have their families have turned their back on them. And so now you have a church that is open up their own. So I just wanted to put that out there because, let's talk about the elephant in the room. If you want to talk about church hurt, we have to address a group of people who have been affected and hurt the most.
Sure.
Dolores, go ahead, Dolores, before we get to these comments.
They are soft targets. They are. But I guess going back to what Tommy was saying about embracing people, right? I think that's dangerous because it's just a lot of people with a lot of problems that don't need to be embracing anybody. They just need to embrace some help. And it's like, but we keep trying to pull people in and we're not well, so we're pulling them into our mess. And now, what I'm saying, now we're getting into the complexities of people, right? And so now how is the leadership even able to handle that when, I have my issues, right? And now And if we're being honest, right, my issues, if they're not checked, right, my issues can actually target other people's issues, right? My issues are now feeding off of other people's issues, right? So like you hear people say there's a narcissist and then there's an empath or an enabler, you know? So, you know, if I'm one who has this narcissism, then my sickness is gonna pull in someone who needs it, you know, someone who I need to feed my sickness. So I'm embracing people, but I don't need to be embracing people because I have issues. You see what I'm saying? So now we're getting into the complexities of people and we're hurting each other.
You know, and I wanted to jump in on that, and I took that stands, Dolores. And I think that's where we have to also make sure that our leadership, and I keep harping on leadership because of this. People, you cut the head off, you kill the body, right? Mm-hmm. So if the head ain't screwed on right, the body ain't going to be right, okay? So in that, this is what I'm saying. We have to be wise enough and led by the Spirit enough to have the discernment to realize that it's not wise or it's not going to be fruitful.
Right.
For different things to happen and take place.
Right.
But we talk about church, we want to follow the rules, and this ain't right and that ain't right. And I think when I was just kind of thinking on this topic earlier, and I was just kind of being quiet about it. It's like, listen, the main thing that's missing is love. Okay? It's like, it's not like it is this. The love is missing, you know, and for people who understand and read the Bible, it's like if you don't have love, you miss the whole point. You know, if you're not in it for the betterment of people, and love is not a feeling. Love is a verb by definition. And if you look in 1 Corinthians 13, it will tell you blow by blow what love is and the character that define what love are. Love is patient. These are significations and then understanding parts of speech. That's a verb that's described, that's telling you what it is. It is kind. It does not take account of any wrongdoing. So when we're dealing with or coming into understanding of dealing with different people, different issues and walks, we have to be wise enough to know if they're coming for help, how to lead and to steer them in a way that's going to be conducive for their help, if that's what they're looking for. Right. Now, the love portion is also this. When we show love, that doesn't mean we condone. That means we love. Because the word within itself, that's God's job. He gets the increase. So I have a personal story that this happened. I was visiting a church one time, and I'm not gonna say any names or where I was, but I was visiting a church, and they were. Let me just say, it made me kind of upset. It made me very upset, right? And I'm a person that believes in what's right is right and what's wrong is wrong. I don't care if you're white, black, purple, green, teal, whatever. Right is right and wrong is wrong. That's something my mom always drilled in my head. So when I was at this church, there were people who were coming out for prayer. And there's a certain young man, I've been to this church several times, and you can just, the young man had what we understand, let's give the term, the feminine characteristics, right? Mm-hmm. There are things that we understood that's like, okay, hey, this brother, he was pushed off, and he was kind of cast aside because, the dudes in the church ain't finna be dapping you up like that because, I don't want to be associated. So the thing about what hurt me about it is that's not Christ. When I read it, that's not Christ. So when I saw this young man, he went down for prayer. You saw everybody else. And it's always the women who would embrace him, but the other women that were occupied, there were two men standing there, would not go to this young man and embrace him and pray for him. So, and this isn't a hoorah to Tommy. I'm just telling you this because I felt that pain that he was feeling. I got up as a visitor from that church, went down, held him, gave him a hug, felt his tears running down my shoulder, and we began to pray. The thing about it is that ministry and God and doing this thing for the body of Christ is a dirty business. You can't do this without getting your hands dirty. You cannot do this without being in an uncomfortable position. Everything that you think prepare for that to be challenged if you're truly walking with God the way that you should. Right. So when you're talking about church hurt, this young man needed some prayer. He needed the embrace, or felt the love. And when I saw the opportunity, I didn't do it to get applause or that was good that you did that. I don't care about that. Yeah. What I cared about at that time was I saw a young man who needed to feel the embrace and love of God at that time. And if we're his hands and feet in the earth, that was me. All right? So moving forward and looking at church hurt and the hypocrisy, and we can go from a list of things. It was a time that you could have done some damage to other people through the misguided neglect of that young man. Because here's the thing, it's a popular saying, hurt people, right? Yep. Right? So let me ask you a hypothetical question. If hurt people, and hurt is the object which gives them the gun to hurt other people, if hurt people is the church, then is the church hurt too?
Man,
yeah.
Wow. My question would be, why is the church hurt?